Welcome back in, everybody. It is the 21 off season. It's still the Kansas City Chiefs. Today, we're looking at offensive tackle in general, but Mitchell Schwartz specifically is kind of the focus of today's video. We'll talk a little bit about offensive line too after we get done with offensive tackle, after we get done with Mitchell Schwartz. I've got it right up here. Mitchell Schwartz's cap number. I've got his dollar amounts for this year. We'll talk about restructuring, or we'll talk about re-extending, and we'll talk about the amount of dead cap hit and the guaranteed money involved. First of all, though, I want to talk about the injury. There's really not a whole lot to say about the Mitchell Schwartz injury, unlike the Eric Fisher video that we just did, because with Mitchell Schwartz, there's just so much unknown. Nobody really ever said what kind of a back injury he's got, even when he first went down with it and was out for months and then had to go all the way through and miss the Super Bowl. And for those of you who are familiar with back injuries, maybe because you've had one or your uncle or your dad, somebody has had one, you know that some of them are very clear cut. It's very precise what the problem is. It's very easy to figure out what the timeline is as far as getting somebody back off of a back injury, whether it's just back to work or in an NFLer's case, back to the playing field. But other back injuries are completely mysterious, and some of them leave as quickly as they came. Others of them hang around for years and then disappear. It could be any number of things. It could be anything from a disease to a pinched nerve to a vertebrae to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It can be genetic. It can be not genetic. It can be not passed down. I mean, there's just all kinds. There's a huge, huge range of things that it can be with a back injury. And so with Mitchell Schwartz here, the reason that we don't really seem to know what the thing is, I think, is because he and the doctors aren't really quite sure what is going on with the back. Now, I know the retirement word has come up, and we're going to talk about that for just a second. And we're hearing people say in print media, digital media, TV media that Mitchell Schwartz might be retiring. And I will say this, it's always possible. In this day and age where football players are worried about concussions, worried about life after football, it's always possible that a football player can retire at any time, at any age, for any reason. Some of them wait until they've earned a little bit of money and then kick out. Others of them don't even wait that long before they kick out. So that's always possible. Once a player starts to cross the age of 30, like Mitchell Schwartz, that possibility goes up of retiring. And once that player is dealing with an injury, yes, the case for retiring goes up. But officially, we've heard nothing from Mitchell Schwartz. Really, the only word we've heard from Mitchell Schwartz recently was his, I think it was Twitter that he put out after the Super Bowl, in which he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, that he was very frustrated that he had to miss so many games, had to miss the Super Bowl. He was frustrated that his toughness had been questioned. He was frustrated about all of that, but that he looked forward to getting normal and healthy. There wasn't a word about what was really going on with the back injury. There was also not a word breathed about retirement. So while I certainly would never rule out retirement for any football player anywhere, and it gets even more likely with an injury over the age of 31, we've just heard nothing about that from Mitchell Schwartz or from any of the team officials. And in all honesty, and when I'm seeing this on websites or I'm hearing it from people who have a platform, I think it's a little bit irresponsible and premature, quite honestly, to assume that Mitchell Schwartz or Eric Fisher or both of them won't be back for 2021. That's a complete doomsday worst case scenario, and it's just not something that I really buy into. Now, is it possible? Yes. If Mitchell Schwartz and the doctors can't figure out what's going on, if the back doesn't get better, yeah, it's possible that he's going to retire, or it's possible that Kansas City might even move on for reasons more than just the injury, for financial reasons. But those are very long-term and worst case scenarios that could happen. And that's fine for us as fans to talk about. I just don't really think that websites should be putting that out there as if that's something that's going to happen, unless they have an inside source somewhere. And if they do, they're not saying that at all. So my assumption is that Schwartz himself doesn't know what's going on right now. I'm sure he is highly frustrated, but knowing that offensive linemen, football players, get back injuries all the time, some of those injuries can be mysterious. Some of them require nothing but rest for months on end, and then the player can work himself back into playing football. I'm not going to assume that Mitchell Schwartz is going anywhere for injury-related reasons until we hear something further. And that's kind of the worst thing, right? To have to wait and wait and wait. Now, let's talk about the money side. That's the injury side. And again, there's really not a whole lot to say there because we just don't know. And I'm not sure Mitchell Schwartz knows at this point. He said he would tell us at a later date. But a lot of times when players and people don't say something, it's just because they don't really know. So that's really all that we can say about the injury today. There's a lot that we can say about the finances. Right here is his cap number for 2021. In 2022, he's a complete free agent. The Chiefs have no contract on him past this year. There is no savings to be had in 2022. There's no dead cap hit in 2022. There is nothing in 2022. It's just 2021. His cap hit for this upcoming season, if he stays on the team, is $10 million. Now, before the Super Bowl, about $2 million of that was already guaranteed, okay, through signing bonus money. I called it $1 million. It was really $1.75 million. Rounded properly, that would be $2 million. One of the guys posted on my last video, I can't remember who, it may have been Theodore. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly who posted that the dead cap hit was actually higher than that, and they were correct after the Super Bowl. After the Super Bowl, in fact, this would change from being $2 million cap hit to an extra $2 million. Now, what's going on right there? As long as Schwartz had the possibility of coming back in 2020, then he wasn't injury protected in any way. After the Super Bowl, the very second the Super Bowl ended and Schwartz didn't play and he basically finished the year injured, that kicked in a $2 million clause. This was going to start in March anyway. Had Schwartz been on the team somewhere around March 19th, March 13th, I forget the exact date of this, had he been on the team, it would have kicked in another $2 million in guaranteed money. But that $2 million was injury protected. So as soon as the Super Bowl ended and Schwartz finished the season officially injured all the way through, that kicked in an extra $2 million that was injury protected. So now it's $3.75 million cap hit. Basically $4 million is already guaranteed, whether Schwartz plays another down for Kansas City or not. Retirement, injury, come back a year later, etc., trade, release, whatever, $3.75 million, $4 million is guaranteed. Now, here's another interesting part of the contract. If he's still on the team on March 19th, there's another roster bonus of $1 million that would kick in at that point. So this hasn't kicked in yet, but on March 19th, there's another $1 million bonus that kicks in that basically, out of his $10 million cap, guarantees him $5 million overall, which means after March 19th, if the Kansas City Chiefs decide we're done, we want to trade, cut, release, whatever, they're only going to save $5 million. As it sits right now, before March the 19th, they could save as much as $6.25 million. So that's what you're looking at right there. Now, in all honesty, I don't think Kansas City is going to do anything with Mitchell Schwartz before March the 19th. As much as I'm sure they would like to know, I don't think Schwartz is going to know before then. I don't think Kansas City is going to know before then. I really personally would not expect any movement from the Kansas City Chiefs on Mitchell Schwartz, and I wouldn't make any either until they know for sure what's going on with the back. And I don't think anybody's going to know for sure what's going on with the back unless Schwartz just up and retires here over the next month. Now, they'll be talking to each other, hopefully. Good communication between the general manager, the coach, and the player should keep a good understanding going here. Sometimes these situations get a little bit touchy. We've seen it before with the Spurs and Kawhi Leonard. We've seen it with Washington football team and their offensive tackle, whose name has totally left me at the moment. We see this from time to time. These situations get a little bit touchy because the team wants the player back if he's healthy, and they're kind of pushing to know and try to figure out what's going on. Player sometimes just doesn't know or isn't ready yet and wants to keep on with some treatment, and it can get a really touchy on some of this stuff. But if everybody's communicating like they ought to, I figure Kansas City, having already owed him $4 million guaranteed, is not going to get too aggressive about trying to get rid of Schwartz before the other $1 million guarantee kicks in. If it was going to guarantee the whole thing, then yeah, they might start putting more pressure on. But just over $1 million, I don't think Kansas City is going to get aggressive. I think they're going to take a wait and see approach all the way through the offseason if they have to, and maybe see where things are once training camp starts. And then maybe if they want to, if it looks like Schwartz just isn't going to be ready for the season, or he's already announced by that time that, yeah, I'm gone, then they could save the $5 million and just move on. Now, that covers Schwartz specifically, I think, but what about the offensive tackle position in general? Because you've basically got 4 guys under contract. If you don't want to do anything, you don't have to. Schwartz is under contract for 1 more season. Eric Fisher's under contract for 1 more season. You have Martinez Rankin under contract. You have, I'm sorry, it's blanking, Lucas Niang under contract. And then Mike Remmers, if you want to have him back, I think, for not too much money, you could have him back very quickly as well. I think Remmers is a free agent, if I remember that correctly. Now, one of my first moves of the offseason, flat out, just from a strategy standpoint, would be to re-sign Mike Remmers in a heartbeat. Whatever a reasonable amount would be before other teams start diving into some of those lesser tackles. Right now, all the other teams are going to be worried about the higher end free agents. Once you start to work your way through the offseason, then other teams are going to start to look at people like Mike Remmers to add to their offensive line. So really, kind of starting backwards here, just to kind of cover my butt on all of this offensive tackle question marks, I would be signing Mike Remmers just as fast as I could to something in the neighborhood of $1 million, $2 million if I can get him for that. Now, he may not want to do that. He may want to go back out into free agency, and having had a pretty good season, he may want to try to get more money than that. And, listen, somebody may very well offer that, or Remmers may be very much willing to come back to Kansas City for a low price, just like he did last year. And if he is willing to do that, I would grab that up in an absolute heartbeat. Now, how would I feel if I've got all 5 guys coming back, even though I'm not yet sure of the injury status of Schwartz and Fisher? I would feel good, not great. I feel pretty sure Fisher's going to come back at some point healthy. Just don't quite know if that'll be at the start of the season or not. Schwartz is kind of a mystery at this point, but listen, we see back injuries all the time, so I would really feel like we'd get at least one of those guys back for next season, if not both. Then if both of them come back, then with Remmers and hopefully Niang, I would feel pretty decent about my depth there at tackle. Now, if Schwartz or Fisher is gone, I start to feel a lot less happy, because then I've got maybe Remmers starting at one of the tackle spots. And as much as I like Remmers, when you look at Remmers' career, I don't know that you're going to be able to count on him from an age and injury standpoint any more than necessarily you would be the other guys coming back at tackle. So as much as I want Remmers desperately coming back for depth, and as much as he may end up playing in 2021, I don't know that I'm necessarily going to be excited about him coming back as the starter. And in fact, I know that I'm not going to be excited about him coming back as the starter. I just desperately want him back as depth, because he is massive quality Super 6 depth. If both guys are gone, Schwartz and Fisher, just from a strategy standpoint, then I don't feel good at all. I saw a couple of websites that suggested that maybe Rankin and Niang could step in as the starting tackles, and who am I to say that they can't? But I would be very surprised. We've seen Rankin get on the field, and he hasn't looked horrible, but the fact that the Chiefs have had as many injuries as they've had, some of those at tackle in 2021, and Rankin hasn't got on the field any more than he did, and they even went out of their way to sign Mike Remmers to a tackle contract last season, suggests that the Chiefs think, like the team that had Rankin before, that Rankin probably isn't going to be a starter in the NFL anytime soon. Glad to have him on the roster, and yeah, he probably does provide some level of depth without this massive drop-off to just critical level. But no, I don't want Rankin going in as my starter in 2021. I would not feel good about that. I don't feel a whole heck of a lot better about Lucas Niang being my starter heading into 2021 either. Now, anytime you draft a guy in the 3rd round, you have a reasonable expectation. That is probably a 50 to 55% chance that that player by his second or third or maybe even fourth season at the latest is going to show up and be a major contributor. Even if he's not a starter, you can count on, to a reasonable degree, getting 600 snaps a year from him and him contributing at a reasonable NFL level. But last year, we didn't get a chance to see Niang play, of course, because of the COVID opt-out. So if the front office, Brett Veach and Andy Reid, had any plans about using Niang to replace Schwartz or Fisher when they drafted him last offseason, and that's a very strong indicator because they used a third-round draft pick to do it, then that's a lot less likely because Niang didn't get any playing time. He didn't get to go through everything that he would normally have gone through had he been on the team. So it kind of postpones that plan by a year. Do I think Niang can play? Yeah, I think there's a very good chance. We saw him at Texas Christian. He looked good, but so did 400 other college players last year and this year and the year before. So until they step on an NFL field as a third-round draft pick, even though you feel pretty good about the chances, no, I really wouldn't want Niang being my starter at tackle heading into 2021 until I've seen more of him. And now we have seen hardly anything of him. We've seen nothing of him on the NFL field. I don't know how much the Chiefs have seen of him, maybe in some of the offseason workouts perhaps, and how they feel about him. There's absolutely no chance, no way, no how that I would feel good in any way about Niang and Rankin being the starters. If you could get Remmers back, I still wouldn't feel great, even though I love Remmers. So you just have a whole ton of question marks, which brings me back full circle to this, and that is that I expect Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz to be back with the Chiefs next year, provided their injuries look like they are progressing and moving through. Now with Fisher, I expect that to happen. I fully, 95% expect that to happen with Eric Fisher. With Schwartz, because it is mysterious, I'm not as sure, but again, back injuries have a way of being mysterious at times. Not all of them, some of them are very clear cut. So with all five guys, I feel good about tackle for next year. If you start to lose Schwartz and Fisher, then I don't feel good at all about it. What should we do strategically since we don't know? And we're kind of playing a wait and see game on both of these guys, but especially Schwartz. Personally, I would look at getting another draft pick. And you know, I've been banging like a monkey on cymbals for them to draft at the interior guard position here for the last 2 or 3 years. And they've done a little bit of that, but not a lot. And we've even heard a little bit of talk of moving Niang to the inside as well. I would, in theory, financially, I would love to see them use a draft pick on another tackle as well during this offseason. The problem is that you've got positions all over the football team that could use those draft picks, okay? You've got them all over, and that could be anywhere from defensive end, that could be over in the secondary, that could be at the wide receiver spot. So at a certain point, you just run out of draft picks and you have to prioritize. But certainly, this would be a great spot tackle when you look at the age of your tackles and you look at the two injuries that both of them are battling and you look at the cap numbers that both of them are bringing, Fisher with 15 and Schwartz with 10, and you start to do the math on the age and the cap numbers, you start to realize this would be a great spot to use a draft pick, whether it's a first rounder or a third rounder or whatever. This would be a really great spot. So no, I wouldn't go through, even though I'm optimistic, reasonably optimistic about both guys coming back for Kansas City, I wouldn't go through the whole off season and not bring back Remmers and not also invest a draft pick or maybe even grab another veteran at tackle. I wouldn't go through the offseason and just not do anything. I would be looking to add to the depth here at tackle, especially from a draft standpoint. And I think that would really do well. Now, the one last thing, if you ignored all the injuries and you're just looking at finances, and I really expected more pushback on it than this, but a lot of you guys really seem to understand the business who watch this channel. From a purely financial standpoint, I would actually applaud them getting rid of Schwartz or Fisher. Schwartz is older, but he's been better throughout his career by a long shot. Schwartz has just been drop dead awesome at times, whereas Fisher has just been the steady, consistent guy. I would be more than happy. I would actually applaud a move in which Fisher or Schwartz, but not both, one or the other, was traded or more likely just released in order to save that massive cap hit for the next 2 or 3 seasons, I think that makes a ton of sense from a financial standpoint moving forward. But for now, because we have so many questions here, I think I would just go through another season with them as they are. I know Kansas City likes both of these tackles. We know that. We know that Kansas City loves both of them. We know that they're okay with the cap hits on both of them because Fisher's had that hefty cap hit last year, and he had $14 million in 2000, and I think it was 17. He had a $14 million cap hit. We know they're okay with this cap hit for Schwartz because I think this is the third year in a row, well, second year in a row that they've had this big of a cap hit on Mitchell Schwartz. So we know that they're reasonably okay with those cap hits because they've done it with them before. It's just when you start to add in age and injury, how do they really feel about that? Now, last thing here, when you finally do get around to figuring out how you feel about Mitchell Schwartz's health, do you restructure? Do you just extend it? And there's a lot of things you could do. There's a lot of different ways you could play with this. But if it looks like Schwartz has a chance of playing next year, if it starts to come around back-wise, and they've kept him past the March 19th $1 million roster bonus, and it looks like they're going to keep him around, I would actually be very interested in trying to just go ahead and sign Schwartz to a second year, and that is extending him through 2021. Maybe find a way to reduce that cap hit for 2021 and then extend on into 2022. There's a lot of different ways you could do that. There's a lot of different ways you could restructure. Really, the restructuring isn't going to work without an extension because Schwartz is gone after 2021 if they don't extend him anyway. So for now, it's just a wait and see game on Schwartz. If it looks like he's going to be healthy, then I would be very much interested. And Chiefs might actually have some leverage at that point to get Mitchell Schwartz back in 2022 for, say, maybe $7 or $8 million, which would take off some of that cap pressure. And if he came back at the level he's been playing at, you'd actually be getting a pretty good value there if you could get him in 22 for $7 or $8 million. So a lot they could do right there on the financial end of that. I think we've talked enough about all of this. We'll probably have another offensive tackle video in a few weeks, but I need to cover the defensive backs next and the linebackers. Thank you a whole bunch. See you later. Bye.